Hey listener, this is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. So I'm doing another reading, and this, oops, I dropped something there. This is Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. So the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And we'll do some more reading of this. So that's it before, it's Penguin Classics. Yeah, I guess I'll go back to where I was then. So we got to page 67. Where were we last time? So, well, normally I would like to give a sort of review of what we've covered so far, but I don't have it prepared on the top of my head right now. So I guess we'll just go to page 67 here. 30 spokes share one hub. Adapt the nothing therein to the purpose in hand, and you will have the use of the cart. Need clay in order to make a vessel. Adapt the nothing therein to the purpose in hand, and you will have the use of the vessel. Cut out the doors and windows in order to make a room. Adapt the nothing therein to the purpose in hand, and you will have the use of the room. Thus, what we gain is something, yet it is by virtue of nothing that this can be put to use. Interesting. So there is this theme in spirituality of, in East spirituality, there's often this idea of everything, or in everything that's a nothing, of the divine being a nothing, in a sense, or a negation of anything in particular. And maybe by something, that would be something material, perhaps, something particular. Now, if you recall, when it's been talking about the way so far, it's been talking about basically if it's anything in particular, it's not the way, because the way is like infinite, basically, right? It's the way is like a body of water with no bottom to it, right? So in that context, in that sense, yeah, if you speak of a particular thing that it is, then you're not really, that's not the way, because you're kind of, because you're not the way, well, you kind of are, but like, you can't really do it justice for pointing at it. That's the thing. The pointing at it isn't the same as the it is that is pointed at. So, and when we gain things, it's by really using that nothingness within, that presence, the divine presence within, that is nothing in particular and yet is everything, or the origin of everything, that which we are. And we are the I am being presence. And that presence, that being that we really are, not so much the ego and the thoughts, which are as much something and some things as physical objects. Those are things that we observe. They might as well, these are more like, they're like objects of our attention, essentially. They might even vie for our attention, but that's beside the point. And the being that we are is the in-between, the cracks between the walls, or the, I'm not sure if that's helpful in this context, but it's the real creation comes from the negation, or rather that which to begin with was being. So in a sense, it's being that is the conscious nothingness, perhaps you could say. But in another sense, to even make like a room, you cut out the door and like the walls, right? So it's the action or the is it's not what you have, but rather what you take from what you have. Even when you're like, if someone's like well, pottery is an example, or it's the hole in the middle, right, of the pot that makes the pot the pot. Otherwise, it's just clay, right? The absence is a significant part of the something that gives the something what it's even worth, so to speak. And that makes sense because everything comes from the nothingness that can be anything and is everything, by virtue of being that superposition of all possibilities that can manifest into any of them once it's been chosen. And once it's been chosen, what being will manifest as, it's like all the superpositions collapse into the one outcome that's been chosen. So the 5 colors make man's eyes blind. The 5 notes make his ears deaf. The 5 tastes injure his palate. Riding and hunting make his mind go wild with excitement. Goods hard to come by serve to hinder his progress. Hence a sage is for the belly, not for the eye. Therefore he discards the one and takes the other. So we have this insatiable desire, perhaps even greed, for more sights, more sensory experiences. It can be tastes, it can be even pleasant sounds. It could be riding or hunting, it could be certain activities. It could be rare goods that are just that you could see as valuable, like, oh, I've got this crisp, oh, that's rare, I've got some gold, you know, something like that. Like, and all these things actually hinder your progress. And the sage isn't interested in the belly, which seems to symbolize greed and desire. He discards the one, so the belly, for and takes the other, the eye, which means to me that by discarding his desires, he attains sight, and not literal vision, but like, I wouldn't even say necessarily the third eye, although not necessarily not that, but more that he gains understanding, wisdom. Perhaps, but I guess You get more in touch with being when you're not stuck in outcome focus of, I want to get this, I want to get that, then I'll be enough. Because you already are. If you're in being, you know that you already are enough, right? You already are complete as you are. You don't need to get all these desires fulfilled to be complete. Because the moment you complete a desire, there'll be a new desire. Or there's always going to be more desires. That way of living where you're seeking to fill in a gap or a hole within you, or a sense of lack. I mean, that's what outcome focus is, isn't it? It's like you're lacking because the outcome isn't how you want it to be, or you haven't got something that you want, or you just feel that you're missing something and you need to go to chase external things to fill in that gap. But I've realized this very recently where, I'm not sure how to explain what exactly it was, but I was in a situation, I don't need to go into the circumstance, but I was in a situation where I felt pretty anxious, where I was having a lot of pent-up negativity all coming up at once rapidly in an overwhelming way. And what I ended up doing was finding a deeper presence within me that where I could observe it from without getting carried away by a current of negativity. I mean, there was positivity too, but anyway. And so I found through a certain experience, a deeper space of observation where you observe your thoughts from. It's easy when I close my eyes, but that's just something I experienced. But what I learned from it is that all that chasing of stimulation, no, I'm not the only one who has that. Also identities as well, or like the sense that, oh, you're strong, you're clever, you're whatever, right? Even negative identities, it's just all this hunger, figuratively, to fill in a sense of incompleteness. And the incompleteness comes from partly the fact that you're chasing these things is all these external things. What it says is the infinity, the abundance of your I am being, your I am presence, is not enough for you. So infinity is not enough for you, which says you're rejecting infinity. So what you're going to get instead is the finite, right? If you reject, and if that's not good enough for you, nothing will be good enough for you, which creates a sense of you're not good enough for abundance because you're not choosing abundance that you are. You're choosing something less than that. You're choosing all these external distractions, the stimulation. It fundamentally reflects a negative belief of not being good enough, of not being complete, which is, instead of self-love, it's fundamentally self-hate. Acting that way, on one hand, you could say causes you to self-hate yourself. On the other hand, you could say it's a reflection or the result of self-hatred. Or you could say that there's two sides of the same coin. Or what's a cause? What's chicken and the egg, right? It's at a certain point, it doesn't really matter. It's like a feedback loop, basically. And many of us are stuck in that mentality where, we feel like there's this or that or the other that we need to get or control or what have you in order to actually be good enough or complete. And what this seems to be talking about, how we are ultimately held back, our focus is hindered by the things we want and by the chasing of the things we want and by the indulging in the things we want. Because all those things are saying we're not good enough already. And that feeling of not being good enough already, which is probably behind even chasing them, is it's painful. But the reason why we're chasing these things is to avoid the pain that comes from not being present or not dwelling in our being. Yeah. Okay. So, favor and disgrace are things that startle. High rank is, like one's body, a source of great trouble. What is meant by saying that favor and disgrace are things that startle? Favor, when it is bestowed on a subject, serves to startle as much as when it is withdrawn. This is what is meant by saying that favor and disgrace are things that startle. What is meant by saying that high rank is, like one's body, a source of great trouble. The reason I have great trouble is I have a body. When I no longer have a body, what trouble have I? Hence, he who values his body more than dominion over empire can be entrusted with the empire. He who loves his body more than dominion over the empire can be given custody of the empire. There's an asterisk there that I'll add that says, when high rank is mentioned, it says, it is probable that the word kuei, K-U-E-I, which means high rank, here has been crept in by mistake, since, as it stands, this line has one word more than the first. If this is the case, then the line should be translated, great trouble is like one's body. Okay, so not high rank then. Not high rank. Great trouble is like one's body, a source of great trouble. Great trouble being a source of great trouble. I'm not sure. Suppose it does say high rank, right? Let's go with that for now. Well, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with rank, but also a sense of there's power and control that comes from it. And if someone values just simply having a body or values his health over power and control, then what they are focused on is sort of a harmony with themselves, perhaps even nature, health, harmony, that sort of thing. They're not seeking power or control. They're just like humble and like focused more in themselves. Now that might sound selfish, but if you consider that trying to change everyone else to make them better and happier is actually a desire to control people. Whereas unconditional love is actually loving yourself and being the cup that overflows. And so that love of yourself overflowing, a cup overflowing onto everyone else, such that you're naturally aiding everyone else without actively trying to change other people. And so someone who really takes care of themselves, like to say their body, perhaps, and if they value their body over power and control, then perhaps they get it as well, that they get that power and control aren't really the important things. So there's that. And high rank, if you're seeking out high rank, then that's a source of trouble. Because if it's about the rank, then it's about the power, and it's about the status, and it's about your ego. And that is not someone you want. Someone who's highly dwelling in ego is not someone you want to have high rank or power. That sounds like someone who would abuse it, right? But it's talking about favor and disgrace startling. So favor, when it's bestowed on a subject, serves to startle as much as when it is withdrawn. I mean, you can certainly be surprised when you get something pleasant, but maybe it's that it can get to your head, just as that it can mess with your head when you lose something. I'm not sure about that one, but yeah, I'll move on to the next one. What cannot be seen is called evanescent. I think that means like glowing. I don't know, maybe not. What cannot be seen is called evanescent. What cannot be heard is called rarefied. What cannot be touched is called minute. What these three cannot, so evanescent, I guess, means something that cannot be seen. Well, it's almost like it says that for me, right? These three things cannot be fathomed, and so they are confused and looked upon as one. So if you can't sense it in any way, if you, the unseen, is it heard? The unheard, is it seen? The untouched, is it heard? Wow. Its upper part is not dazzling. Its lower part is not obscure. Dimly visible, it cannot be named, and returns to that which is without substance. This is called the shape that has no shape, the image that is without substance. This is called indistinct and shadowy. Go up to it, and you will not raise its head. Follow behind it, and you will not see its rear. Hold fast to the way of antiquity, in order to keep in control of the realm of today. The ability to know the beginning of antiquity is called the thread running through the way. So it's talking about the way. It's talking about being, the being from which everything else has come from. Talking about source, it's talking about the infinite creator. These things are the same in my eyes. It's talking about the way, talking about the Tao, the infinity source field from which everything, that is nothing in particular, and that is that is all the possibilities at once. That's why any possibility manifests from it, because it is the nothing from which everything comes from. And the Akashic records contain all the possibilities before they prior to manifestation, because it's part of source, I guess. And that seems to be what it's talking about. What cannot be seen, what cannot be heard, what cannot be touched. Something that is not dazzling, but not obscure. Something that is dimly visible, despite not being able to be seen, but can't be named. And returns to that which it is without substance. Returns to that which is without substance. What I mean, form is ultimately temporary, right? And when you die, you go back to spirit realm, right? Source, that field. It's an image without substance, distinct and shadowy, indistinct and shadowy. Yeah, basically, yeah, I've said what I interpret it as already. Of old, he who was well versed in the way was minutely subtle, mysteriously comprehending, and too profound to be known. It is because he could not be known that he can only be given a makeshift description. Tentative, as if fording a river in winter, hesitant, as if in fear of his neighbors, formal like a guest, falling apart like thawing ice, thick like the uncarved block, vacant like a valley, murky like muddy water. Who can be muddy and yet settling, slowly become limpid? Oh, the present text reads, that which can be worn and not newly made, the negative must have crept in by mistake, worn and then new. Who can be at rest and yet stirring, slowly come to life? Who holds fast to this way, desires not to be full, because he is not full, that he can be worn and yet newly made. So honestly, it's talking about pretty much the same thing as before, just in a different way of articulating it. The murky like a muddy water is interesting because there's, in a sense, it's obscured, but it's also all the possibilities it could be or could manifest are there. And when he says tentative and hesitant and like, as if in fear of his neighbors, that's not saying it's not talking about an actual person, and it's not talking about, and it's not saying that the way is fearful. Minutely subtle, mysteriously comprehending. I don't know who was well versed in the ways. Is it just talking about the way indirectly, or is it talking about some sort of being or presence or something that is a he and was well versed in the way? I don't know, but honestly, I think just hearing that is enough, especially in the context of the page before it. It's dealing with the same sort of thing. It's all dealing with the same thing, to be honest. But yeah. I do my utmost to attain emptiness. I hold firmly to stillness. The myriad creatures all rise together, and I watch their return. The teeming creatures all return to their separate roots. Returning to one's roots is known as stillness. This is meant by returning to one's destiny. Returning to one's destiny is known as the constant. Knowledge of the constant is known as discernment. Woe to him who willfully innovates while ignorant of the constant. But should one act with knowledge of the constant, one's action will lead to impartiality. Impartiality to kingliness, kingliness to heaven, heaven to the way to perpetuity, and to the end of one's days more meet with no danger. So, that emptiness, that stillness, that is presence, it's being. It's rather than ego, it's the observer consciousness that you are, that I am present, which is ultimately part of source and everything, all that is, it's that nothingness. that we are. So when you do that, you return to one's destiny. So when we're in that constants. So when there's this constant, well, the form of, there's a lot of temporary form in the material, right? It tends to be temporary rather than eternal or constant. But presence, being, is eternal, is constant. And that's where we find one's destiny, in the sense that you're being you, not your ego, right? When you're present, and that your destiny is ultimately, in a sense, to go back to source, or ever more empty, perhaps. And you do get discernment by understanding or having knowledge of the constant, that which is beyond the temporary. And those who willfully innovate, but without being ignorant of the constant, those who are trying to change outcomes, even if they're being clever in how they're changing outcomes, fundamentally, like, if they're ignorant of the eternal being, the eternal presence, then what they end up with is woe. One should act from knowledge of the constant. One's action will lead to impartialities, and this naturally, it won't be all that egoic bias. It'll just be. And from there you get kingliness. So what exactly does it mean by kingliness? I feel like I can't really explain it, but it should be apparent just from hearing it contextually. But it doesn't mean literally being like a king, although it kind of does. But you're in a sense stronger and abundant and acting and seeing from a higher place, from being present. And there's that you could describe as kingliness, perhaps. It's like in the tarot, right? The idea of the king, perhaps even the emperor, in tarot, which is this idea of, like, there's this strength that comes from being true to who you are and sitting on the throne and it seems to represent like being present, as opposed to if you're not present, dwelling ego, then you're in a weakened position, you're not on the throne. Heaven to the way. It's like kingliness to heaven. So we get to the divine from that, and the way is from that, and perpetuity from that, and ultimately no danger, because it's the sense that a lot of that we go through is karmic, right? Especially stuff with negative karma, I suppose you could say, and also that by not following the way, there's disharmony and chaos that comes into your life generally, and that might be, well, harm, danger. So yeah, the best of all rulers is but a shadowy presence to his subjects. Next comes the ruler they love and praise. Next comes one they fear. Next comes one with whom they take liberties. When there is not enough faith, there is lack of good faith. Hesitant, he does not utter words lightly. When his task is accomplished and his work done, the people say, it happened to us naturally. So, right. So it's talking about, in order of preference, how good a ruler is, right? Suppose you starting off taking it literally, then we can apply it to the mind as well. So there's a ruler, and he's a shadowy presence to his subjects. He doesn't utter words lightly, so he's laconic, I suppose you could say. He's because words are power, words are significance. So yeah, he speaks with a power, but when it's I guess you could say necessary, or I'm sure you get the point. You know, he kind of that ruler will speak what needs to be said, when it needs to be said, and that's it. And it will have power to it. When his task is accomplished and his work done, people will say, yeah, I'm just naturally. They won't even notice. They will feel like they did it. Or they feel like, because it's a sort of governorship by restraint. It's not trying to make stuff happen. It's more, there's a whole bunch of mistakes that a lot of rulers will do, or a lot of governing policy, and policy. And there's a restraint from those mistakes. All the stuff that the ego would do, all that self-aggrandizement, all that ideological bias or what have you, none of that would be done. It would just simply be, maintaining things in a harmonic way. And it will feel natural, and it will seem like not much is actually done. It's naturally happened that way. It'll be harmonic. So after that is just a rule that they love and praise. But that's not necessarily perfect. Things might not actually work out for them so much. And in fact, they love and praise the ruler. They can actually identify the things that were done, right? There might actually be problems in the things that will be done that later down the line become apparent. But they love and praise that ruler. Okay, fair enough. But it's not the shadowy presence of a ruler that isn't noticed that much because they're that good at what they do. Next comes one they fear. So interesting that this will be said, because the reason for this is that next there comes one whom they take liberties. So this is saying that if people aren't afraid, if they don't love, I mean, if they don't even have fear of any repercussions for not following the law, they'll just break it. That's what it's saying. And that if there's not enough faith, I suppose, in the governance, there is a lack of good faith. People don't act in good faith. People don't act towards others well. That seems to be what it's saying. But if you look at it on another level, with our relationship with our own mind, I suppose you should say, but an ego is going to regard itself, being self-aggrandizing. It's going to be very loud and getting lots of things for itself, and very active about getting more and more and more identity or objects or experiences or what have you. But if you're in presence and being primarily, and I guess you could describe it as shadowy presence. Presence certainly is the word, a key word here. But it's not loud. Well, if you think like, you've ever seen someone like Eckhart Tolle or something, right? They don't really, there's this humility that comes off them, that you get a sense that if you didn't know who they were, you wouldn't really notice them much. And the way he describes it is actually, yeah, sometimes people just don't notice it. But that's not necessarily a problem. But it's more like, yeah, all that egoic noise, so to speak, that it's not there. They don't necessarily get loads of love and praise, or they might do, but they don't necessarily, because, it just seems like it's all flowing naturally, all the actions are flowing naturally, and all the mental activity, it's just flowing, right? It's not, nothing's forced. And it's not pain either. It's not reacting to people in stressed ways. And there is a carefulness with words, a care taken in what's spoken. And they have faith, act in good faith, and other people will tend to have faith in them and act in good faith towards them as well, just naturally. People won't take liberties with them. Just like, because that beingness resonates, radiates out, like, let alone feared. Yeah. Next page. When the great way falls into disuse, there are benevolence and rectitude. When cleverness emerges, there is great hypocrisy. When the six relations are at variance, there are filial children. When the state is benighted, there are loyal ministers. I don't know what rectitude means, to be honest. I can't understand the beginning of it. But I don't know what filial means either. I can't remember. And when the state is benighted, there are loyal ministers. Is it because they're afraid? And so they're more loyal. Whereas when things are abundant, when things are going well, there's more, they more feel room to maneuver, to leverage, to get the more power. I got nothing much. I haven't got much to say about that because I honestly don't. Yeah. This one's surprising. I'll read it out. I don't entirely understand it yet. Exterminate the sage, discard the wise, and the people will benefit a hundredfold. Exterminate benevolence, discard rectitude, and the people will again be filial. Exterminate ingenuity, discard profit, and there will be no more thieves and bandits. These three, being false adornments, are not enough, and the people must have something to which they can attach themselves. Exhibit the unadorned and embrace the uncarved block. Have little thought of self and as few desires as possible. I'd say the beginning part of that is honestly confusing, and I don't get it. Sorry, I just don't like, but the last two lines, the last two sentences, or the last two bits, I agree with. So exhibit the unadorned and embrace the uncarved block. Have little thought of self and as few desires as possible. So first of all, the uncarved block is a very humble thing. It's not this egoic chasing of possessions. Secondly, it's an uncarved block has the potential to be anything, perhaps, and it might remind one of the potential, the potential that that which doesn't have form has. It's that nothing that's the source of creation, not the something. Have little thoughts of self and a few desires as possible. So yeah, desires, if you've got desires, then it's like you're missing something and you have it, you'll get the outcome that you want, and then you'll be complete. Except that never really happens with desire. There's always new desires, and there's never that sense of completeness. And the whole chasing desires, the whole seeking activity, being a seeker of something, anything, that is, whether it's spiritual or not, that there's this whole idea of you're already abundant. You're already all the infinite possibilities. Unless, of course, you take yourself out of the space of the being that you are. But even then you are that. You're just not aligned with yourself, but rather with the limited, which is kind of like an act of self-hatred. Exterminate learning, and there will no longer be worries. Maybe that's like if you're seeking knowledge, there's a sense of limitation in that. Between yea and nay, how much difference is there? Between good and evil, how great is the distance? What others fear, one must also fear, and wax without having reached the limit. The multitude are joyous, as if partaking of the Tao Lao offering, or going up to a terrace in spring. I alone am inactive and reveal no signs. So it's about what I've been talking about when at the beginning it's almost, in the end, it's kind of like chasing, seeking something to complete you when you already are complete, and how fruitless that is. There's also the sense of yes and no between good and evil. These polarities, these dualities are kind of illusions, and that ultimately it's the non-duality that's truly meaningful. The non-duality isn't anything in particular, because it's not particularly one or the other duality or multiplicity. It is non-particularly everything, and yet it's the nothing. Because it's nothing in particular, it is non-particularly everything. Same difference between good and evil, well, there's wax and wane, so let's sort of wax without having reached the limit. Normally you'd expect there to be a limit, but if there's no limit, then I guess it's, I don't really get that bit. What's the Tai Lao offering anyway? Does it say? The most elaborate kind of feast consisting of 3 animals, the ox, sheep, and pig. Seems a bit extravagant. Yeah, there's some of the lines there I don't get. But at the end it says, I alone am inactive and reveal no signs. Well, apparently that's not connected to the rest of it, but yeah, in footnotes it just says that this is out of place. Maybe, well, some of it is. Anyway, like a baby that has not yet learned to snarl, listless as though with no home to go back to. The multitude all have more than enough. I alone seem to be in want. My mind is that of a fool. How blank. Vulgar people are clear. I alone am drowsy. Vulgar people are alert. I alone am muddled. Calm like the sea, like a high wind that never ceases. The multitude all have purpose. I alone am foolish and uncouth. I alone am different from others and value being fed by the mother. I don't think it's literal. I think it seems to be referring to how he's seen by others by not chasing all the other things. So he calls them vulgar, but they're clear. So they're clear in what they want or what they think, or that it's pretty clear to them what they want and what is how things are, but it's not actually that simple, obviously. It's oversimplified. He's got a blank mind, and that's considered foolish. But instead of having rattling around all these ideas and all these things, but is it foolish? I alone seem to be in want. Listless as if with no home to go back to. I think there's a sense of detachment that this is giving off there. So this is someone who is detached and not and is apparently deemed to be, for those who are ignorant, I suppose, lacking in some way, but is actually has everything he needs. He doesn't have all these, he doesn't need all these things, doesn't need a purpose. He values being fed by the mother. And perhaps that mother is the way. In his every movement, a man of great virtue follows the way and the way only. As a thing, the way is shadowy, indistinct and shadowy. Yet within it is an image, shadowy and indistinct, yet within it is a substance, dim and dark. And yet within it is an essence. This essence is quite genuine. And within it is something that can be tested. From the present back to the antiquity, its name never deserted it. It serves as a means for inspecting the fathers of the multitude. How do I know that the fathers of the multitude are like that? By means of this. The way? By means of the way, maybe? So it's not this clear-cut sense of what you need to do, but there is an image, perhaps divine image beyond the material forms, spiritual sense, perhaps, of something more, of something beyond day-to-day life, that being present in the way, tuning with the way that allows you to sort of kind of get hints from the universe. Synchronicity might be an example of that. Yeah, next one, I guess. Bowed down, then preserved, bent, then straight, hollow, then full, worn, then new, a little, then benefited, a lot, then perplexed. Therefore, the sage embraces the one and is a model for the empire. He does not show himself and so is conspicuous. He does not consider himself right and so is illustrious. He does not brag and so has merit. He does not boast and so endures. It is because he does not contend that no one in the empire is in a position to contend with him. The way the ancients had it, bowed down, then preserved, is no empty saying. Truly, it enables one to be preserved to the end. So, if you're humble, one thing is that people won't view as a threat, especially people who their egos might be threatened by someone who's doing well, or they perceive as doing well, or perceive as being illustrious, the high self-esteem, the higher standing, you know. There's a hollow then full. Yeah, so by not being full of yourself, you are filled with something more than ego, being, presence. Worn, then new. Is that talking about like clothes? If you're wearing like old clothes rather than all this flashy, fashionable stuff, then people might think, "Oh, that's a fashion. Let's go wear old clothes." I don't know. A little, then benefited. So not going out to get lots of stuff for yourself, but then benefiting by things coming to you naturally. A lot, then perplexed. So that seems to be linked to the first bit, the bit before it. So then you might even be surprised at what comes to your way, you know, what benefits you. Therefore, the sage embraces the one and is a model for the empire. No, that is pretty clear what that means. He does not show himself and is conspicuous. Well, what stands out more than anything is perhaps not trying to stand out and just being yourself, because everyone else is trying to be someone else. And I know from having grown up with different, I suppose Asperger's or whatever else, like, I mean, these are labels, right? But like, and I'm not saying that I was in the way the whole time, but I will say is that I didn't have this urge to do what everyone else is doing and to be popular or whatever. So it's sort of not fitting in by not actively trying to fit in. That is a sort of conspicuousness, even if it's not necessarily conspicuous one wants. But it's different when someone is dwelling in being. They will be different because they won't be playing all those games. And people will notice that. And on some level, they may respect it. They may even fear it. And he's not got something to prove. He's not trying to prove that he's right. And so people would take him seriously. Man, for so long, I was trying so hard to like, for people to think I was right. And not just that, I was trying so hard for people to view it the way I viewed it. I was trying to exert control on some level, subconsciously, I guess, over what other people thought. I was like, oh yeah, I'm clever. I know this. I know something about this, right? But yeah, someone who listens, someone who's more quiet and listens, someone who's more humble, and someone who's not trying to show all the answers. You come off as more insecure if you're trying too hard to like show you know things. You might start noticing if you're gaining more awareness that your reason for speaking up about your opinion when there's conversation might be showing off knowledge or wisdom or something that like you're not aware that's your reason until you are aware that's your reason. And they're like, oh shit, man, I just caught myself there. It's like, that's my ego doing this, that's my ego doing that. It's good when you can catch your ego doing ego things. Anyway, he does not brag and so has merit. That's similar to the last point, really. He does not boast and so endure. So people are like, he's not like, oh, what a dick, right? He's like, he's saying he's the best, how cocky and arrogant he is. Wow. Yeah, we're going to bring him down a notch. Yeah. Whereas, or like, oh, they might envy him, like, oh, that guy, he you know, that person is like, got all this, such a high position or such high esteem or such high view of themselves. You know, they're sort of like, that bastard. I envy that. And then they're like, they may not endure. Don't worry about that. Oh, no, it's something in the background. Anyway, so it is because he does not contend that no one in the empire is in a position to contend with him. He's not trying to prove himself that he's good enough. He's not trying to come from a place of insecurity of lacking or to change outcome. No. He is self-assured and just as being him and being abundant and unlimited. That's just how he is and how he's being. And that is something that people can't contend with. Yeah, people can't contend with those who are dwelling in ego. They're just, I guess you could say, they're holding themselves back massively, actually. In a sense, whereas if you dwell on the being that you are in presence, so much untapped potential comes out. Yeah. So, and those with the baggage or the weight of ego and all that suffering, that they can't contend with that. They just can't. The way the ancients had it, bowed down, then preserved, is no empty saying. Truly, it enables one to be preserved in the end. That if everyone's playing these games, like the game of, I don't know about that, but like the game of like the social hierarchy, the ladder of reputation, and oh, you know, all this squabbling and over social status, you know, like you're preserved because you're not harmed or hurt from that, because you're not engaging with that when you're in that restrained, humble beingness, presence. So honestly, I sense that it might be time for me to Yeah, I would say it might be about time to finish this particular episode, but it was good. It was interesting. Um, yeah. Uh, oh, there was something I was going to do. I was going to do a reading of, oh, oh yeah, Ethics by Spinoza. But honestly, I tried recording it and it was difficult. I struggled. I really struggled. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't satisfied by how I'd done it. So I was just like, I'll leave that until I'm ready or something. But that might be saying I'm not complete. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes with that. But it's very dense. It's got a lot. It's like, but it's got this very logical structure, and each step relies on previous steps. You need to fundamentally understand each step along the way to understand the next step. You need to study it basically, and it's not something you could just read and get. You know, you would struggle just as much as me. Like anyone, like you can't just read it and get it unless you already. And if you do, you don't really need to read it, I guess. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure if it's actually the most appropriate book for a reading, at least not at this stage. But anyway, I might get to it eventually, or maybe reading at my own time. I might have certain insights to share or something. In the meantime, enjoy the spring. It's certainly getting a bit nicer. Well, that is if you're listening to it now, around now. If you listen to this later, enjoy whatever is in your life, I guess. Look at the good things in life, because there's always negative things you could look at. And otherwise, I guess, have a nice day and bye for now.